So good evening everyone, and welcome to Yeshi Norbu, and welcome to this evening's topic titled What is Mind? As Kaisa mentioned, this is an introduction to the first module in this Discovering Buddhism program titled Mind and Its Potential. So we've got till 8:30 this evening, so we'll be having about a 20-minute break somewhere in the middle. And some of the things I'd like to cover this evening is, of course, we're going to look at the Buddhist theory of mind, but to begin, I'd like to present another theory of mind. Of course, there are many theories of mind. One that is quite widely accepted in the scientific community, the view of the scientific materialistic view of mind. So I'll first briefly introduce that, and then we'll use that and compare that to the Buddhist theory of mind. And within the Buddhist theory of mind, I'm going to introduce a number of topics this evening. First, how the mind is defined in Buddhism. Where does the mind come from? How we can divide up the mind in a number of different ways. How the mind functions. In particular, how the mind is really the creator of our experiences. And then we're going to look at what is the nature of our own mind. Then what is the potential of our mind? What can we do with our mind? And then how do we actualize that potential? So there's some of the points that I want to briefly touch on this evening, because each one of those can be a huge topic. So we'll just give a little bit of a taster for each of those points this evening. And I'd like this evening to be interactive. So if you have any questions, then ask questions as we go along. So we're not just going to have a Q&A at the end. We'll do it interactive. I think that'll work a lot better. So before we begin, let's just sit quietly for a few minutes just to relax the body, relax the mind, and get ourselves in a nice, relaxed, focused state for this evening's session. Allowing your awareness to descend into the body and simply become aware of sensations throughout the body. And if you notice any areas of tightness or tension in any part of the body, then use the out-breath to relax and release that tightness or tension as best you can. And bringing your awareness to the area of the face, and soften and relax all the muscles in the face. The mouth and jaw soft and relaxed. And all the muscles around the eyes soft and relaxed. In this way, allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. And then we can take 3 slow, deep breaths, maintaining awareness of sensations throughout the body as you breathe. And then allow your breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. Not trying to control or regulate the breath in any way. Simply allowing it to flow naturally and effortlessly. And then give yourself permission to let go of any hopes or fears, worries or concerns about the past or the future. To give yourself permission to let go of all of these things for the duration of this short session here this evening. And simply allow the mind to come to rest in the present moment. And simply becoming aware of the rhythm of your breath. Noticing if it's long or short, deep or shallow, regular or irregular, without trying to modify it in any way. Simply noticing the rhythm of the breath. And then just take a moment to think about your motivation for coming here this evening. And then set the best possible motivation you can for attending this evening's session. And try to include others in your motivation. That you're not just doing this for your own benefit, but you're doing it so you can be of more benefit to those around you. And so then with this relaxed body and mind, we can finish this meditation and begin our discussions here together this evening. So as I mentioned, we'll briefly begin with a theory of mind that is quite widely accepted in the scientific community. And it's the scientific materialistic view of mind. And scientific materialism is a branch of science within which everything it's asserted that everything can be explained in terms of matter and energy. In fact, I've got a definition here about materialism, and it says, materialism is the view that the only thing that exists is matter. If anything else, such as mental events, exists, then it is reducible to matter. And a quote from a physicist named Sean Carroll, he says, who's supporting this theory, he says, "We are collections of atoms, operating independently of any immaterial spirits or influences. Under naturalism, there isn't that much difference between a human being and a robot. We are all just complicated collections of matter, moving in patterns, obeying impersonal laws of physics in an environment within an arrow of time." Doesn't sound very appealing. To talk a little bit more about the scientific materialistic theory of mind, I'd like to read a little bit from a book by Alan Wallace called Tibetan Buddhism from the Ground Up. Alan Wallace has been a Buddhist practitioner for more than 40 years, and he also has studied physics at Stanford, or Princeton maybe. And this is what he says. Contemporary scientific materialism asserts that objective reality is composed entirely of matter and energy, and that reality has been that way since the origin of the universe. In this scientific system, mind is an emergent property of the nervous system, and the nervous system is composed entirely of matter and energy. Scientific materialism offers quite a plausible account of the evolution from unconscious atoms and energy to the emergence of the human mind. This theory states that some point early in the history of the cosmos, if we accept the Big Bang theory, atoms formed into molecules. These molecules had new properties. A molecule such as water, H2O for instance, has qualities not found in either of its atomic components of hydrogen and oxygen, either individually or collectively. To take some of its obvious properties, water is wet at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, it freezes at 32 degrees, and salts will dissolve in it. These attributes not found in the individual atoms of the water molecule are therefore called emergent properties of these molecules. So what he's saying is that when atoms came together to form molecules, then new properties emerged. So hydrogen, two hydrogen, one oxygen came together to form water. We have new properties emerging of wetness and freezing and so forth. He then says, organic molecules then combined to form single-celled organisms as well as viruses, which cannot be classified with certainty as either being living or non-living. In the former, life emerged as a property of the molecules that made up the cell. Eventually, the first cells with a neurosystem, such as Hydra, evolved, and from this point we may speak of the emergent property of primitive awareness. Human consciousness, with all its complexity, the theory concludes, is merely an emergent property of a far more sophisticated configuration of matter and energy, the human body, which evolved according to the laws of natural science. So again, what this theory states is that in the process of evolution, physical evolution, when we get some primitive nervous system evolving, then due to the complexity of that, we have the emergent property of mind or consciousness coming from that. So similarly then, human mind is simply an emergent property of the brain of the nervous system. So then what this theory is saying is that consciousness or mind can be reduced to matter and energy. So therefore, an implication of this theory is that our thoughts and emotions are nothing more than simply chemical flow and electrical signals in the brain. There's nothing more than that. It goes on, he says, now let us return to the water molecule. If the configuration of its individual atoms is destroyed and the atoms separate, the unique properties of the water molecule do not go any. When the neurosystem ceases functioning, materialists say, awareness disappears without a trace. The implications of this view concerning the nature of death are clear. Individual awareness vanishes, and only a decomposing configuration of matter and energy remain. So one of the implications of this theory of mind, of course, is that our mind, came into existence at the beginning of this life when the nervous system started functioning. And at the end of this life, when the nervous system and brain ceases functioning, the mind won't go anywhere. It'll just cease existing because it's emergent property of the brain and that ceases functioning. So that's a implication of this view. And then he goes on a bit further. He says, the above theory is plausible and intelligently conceived. Its proponents go on to insist, however, that it is true and that incompatible theories are unscientific. If we are to adopt that theory as objectively true, we should have a sound understanding of what is meant by matter and energy. So the basis of this view is that it can be explained in terms of matter and energy, but then we really need to know what is matter and energy. And then he goes on to say, but here we run into problems. Nobel Prize winning physicist Richard Feynman asserts that modern science has no notion of what energy is. And while scientists believe almost unanimously in the existence of atoms, their views vary widely as to what atoms are. Some noted physicists believe that they are mere properties of space, others contend they are sets of relationships, and still others, including noted physicist Werner Heisenberg, deny that they are material things at all. Particularly when venturing into the realm of quantum mechanics, we encounter statements by leading physicists that not only energy, but the entire array of elementary particles are simply constructs of our theories. Thus, physicist John Gribben even suggests that atomic particles did not exist until they are observed in this century. So in this view, everything in the known universe can be explained in terms of matter and energy. So matter and energy is fundamental, it's primary, and that consciousness or mind is simply an emergent property of that. But of course then to understand or how to explain how does conscious experience come out of matter and energy is not easy, and so far no satisfactory explanation has been given. And even to the point where some physicists now even assert that actually there's no such thing as conscious experience. It's an illusion. So that's how they solve the problem. Well, there's no problem because there's no such thing as conscious experience. It's just an illusion. Now, Buddhism asserts that mind is fundamental, not the world, the material world. And actually, I've got a quote here from well-known cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman, who, like many scientists, has spent many years trying to work out how consciousness can come from the brain or from the body. And now he's sort of flipped around, and his assertion now is that mind is fundamental. And so this is what he says. As a conscious realist, I am postulating conscious experience as ontological primitives, the most basic ingredients of the world. I am claiming that experiences are the real coin of the realm. The experiences of everyday life, my real feeling of a headache, my taste of chocolate, that really is the ultimate nature of reality. I believe that consciousness and its contents are all that exist. Space-time, matter, and fields never were the fundamental denizens of the universe, but have always been, from their very beginning, among the humbler contents of consciousness, dependent on it for their very being. While neuroscientists struggle to understand how there can be such a thing as first-person reality, quantum physicists have to grapple with the mystery of how there can be anything but a first-person reality. And then another quote from a theoretical physicist, John Wheeler, a very well-known physicist. He says, "Useful as it is under everyday circumstances to say that the world exists out there, independent of us, that view can no longer be upheld. There is a strange sense in which this is a participatory universe." And then another couple of quotes from another well-known physicist, Andre Linde, who's a professor of physics at Stanford University. He says the following: "The current scientific model of the material world obeying laws of physics has been so successful that we forget about our starting point as conscious observers, and conclude that matter is the only reality and that perceptions are only helpful for describing it. But in fact, we are substituting the reality of our experience of the universe with a conceptually contrived belief of an independently existing material world. Is it possible that consciousness, like space-time, has its own intrinsic degrees of freedom, and that neglecting these will lead to a description of the universe that is fundamentally incomplete? What if our perceptions are as real, or maybe even in a certain sense, even more real than material objects? The standard assumption is that consciousness, just like space-time, before the invention of general relativity, plays a secondary subservient role, being just a function of matter and a tool for the description of the truly existing material world. But let us remember that our knowledge of the world begins not with matter, but with perceptions." So with those comments, let's now have a look at the Buddhist theory of mind. Is there any question about sort of the basic scientific materialistic theory that's not clear? So again, in scientific materialism, and of course this is only a particular branch of science, the assertion is that everything in the known universe can be described in terms of matter and energy, and that the mind is simply an emergent property of the brain. So usually they either say it is the brain, it's either the function of the brain, or an emergent property of the brain. So let's compare that with the Buddhist theory of mind. So first, terminology. There are a number of terms used here, such as mind, consciousness, awareness. And if we speak very generally, they mean the same thing. But we need to be very careful in that sometimes these terms, depending on the context, can take on a very specific meaning. Then they don't mean the same thing. Particularly this word here, awareness, is heavily used in Buddhism. And unfortunately, different translators translate different Tibetan or Sanskrit terms with the same word awareness. So it can be very, very confusing, this word awareness. So we have to, when we see these words, we have to pay very close attention. What is the person talking about here? But when we speak very generally, and particularly this evening, mind equals consciousness equals awareness. So that's a little bit of terminology. So how to define the mind? So one very simple definition of mind in Buddhism is that mind is that which is clear and knowing. Sometimes translated as mind has clarity and awareness. So in this two-word definition, the first word in the definition is the entity, describing the entity of the thing. The second word is the function. What does it do? For example, a simple definition of fire is hot and burning. So what is the entity or nature of fire? Is heat. What does fire do? It burns. So what is the entity or nature of mind? The mind is clear or has clarity. What does the mind do? It knows, it is aware. So let's have a more close look at these two words. So this word clear or clarity implies two things. One is, because the mind is clear or has clarity, it's not physical. So it's not an emergent property of the brain. So in Buddhism, there are two types of phenomena in the world. There is physical, which is matter and energy, and then there's non-physical, which is mind or consciousness or awareness. So that's already one distinction between this view and the scientific materialistic view. And the other implication of the word clear or clarity, because the mind is clear, has clarity, it enables things to appear in it. Just like a mirror, because a mirror is clear, reflections can appear in a mirror. Likewise, because the mind is clear or has clarity, it means thoughts, emotions, images, and so forth can appear in the mind. What does the mind do? What's its function? The mind knows, it is aware. So the mind engages or knows those appearances that appear in the mind. So this is a very simple definition of the mind. Anything there not clear?
Yes, may I ask?
Yeah, sure.
I was thinking about the word clear.
Sure.
It is not physical.
Oh.
Like no, is that no energy?
Right. So of course, this is not, I'm not saying that proves it's not physical. It's just an implication of the word.
Yes.
Is, yes, it's non-physical. So therefore, because it's non-physical, it has no spatial characteristics. So our mind is not here. It's not anywhere because it's not physical. It has no spatial properties. So that's, we need to...
Where is it then?
Well, it's non-physical, so it doesn't make any sense to talk about it like that.
Yeah.
Okay. See, again, the thing is that when we start to investigate this, we usually come from the assumption that matter is primary. And so everything is then in terms of matter, in terms of shape, size, spatial location. So we're trying to fit things into that model. And that's why it gets difficult. That's why in the scientific materialistic view, it's difficult to explain the mind. Because actually, you know, does a thought have any physical characteristics? An actual thought? Does it? I mean, in our own first-person experience, I don't think any of our thoughts or emotions have any physical characteristics, which is interesting because, you know, we talked about emergent property and that, like, when two hydrogen and oxygen come together, we have the emergent property of wetness. Everywhere else, in the universe, emergent properties of physical things are themselves physical. The only exception is the mind. So doesn't that seem a bit strange that everywhere else emergent properties are always physical, yet here, when they come to explain the mind, it's the one exception where the emergent property is actually not physical. Okay. At the beginning of this life. What is the Buddhist assertion? Again, I'll read from Alan Wallace here. He says the following. Let us now see how a Buddhist theory of consciousness explains death. We can begin with an analogy. The central principle of modern physics is the conservation of mass energy. This means that matter and energy may undergo innumerable transformations, from solid to liquid to gas, from thermal to electromagnetic energy, and so on. But no quantity of mass energy is ever lost, nor does any form of matter and energy ever arise from nothing. So one of the fundamental principles of classical physics, conservation of mass energy. You can't create it, you can't destroy it, you can only transform it. Which means when they come to explain the origins of the universe, and the most common theory there is the Big Bang theory, they can't really say that the Big Bang theory means that the universe comes from nothing, because that violates fundamental principles of conservation of mass energy. So therefore, even though this universe had a beginning at the time of the Big Bang, they couldn't say that that was the beginning of matter and energy. So similarly in Buddhism, there's a similar theory of conservation of consciousness. You can't create it, you can't destroy it, you can simply transform it. Which means, yes, we can talk about a beginning of this life, but we can't say that there was a beginning of consciousness, because that would violate the fundamental principles of conservation of mass energy. And here's something important he says. Buddhism asserts that all natural phenomena, including, of course, mental events, arise in dependence upon two types of causes, substantial causes and cooperative conditions. And this is something very important. So what's a substantial cause is the thing that transforms into the result. For example, the substantial cause of a plant is a seed. It's the seed that transforms into the plant. But for that transformation to happen, we need cooperative conditions. We need soil, sunlight, water, and so forth. But it's the seed that is the substantial cause of the plant. But the cooperative, so the substantial cause of a physical thing must be the physical thing. But the cooperative conditions can be mental, because in that growth of the plant could be that the farmer had an intention or to make money, so they irrigated. So that intention, of course, is mental. So cooperative conditions include mental things, but it's a physical substantial cause, physical result. Similarly, the substantial cause of the mind is mental, but the cooperative conditions that help that unfolding can be physical, because things like diet and DNA and neurological things and environmental conditions, all these physical things can affect how the transformation of the mind unfolds. But the cause of the mind is the seed of the mind, the earlier moment of the mind. So that's something very important. So therefore, what are the implications of this theory of mind of Buddhism is that the conservation of consciousness means the mind did not begin at the beginning of this life and it will not end at the end of this life. That what is the cause of the first moment of mind in this life was a previous moment of mind, hence an earlier life. What at the end of this life, that last moment of mind in this life will cause another moment of mind, hence a future life. So there's a unbroken continuum of consciousness. Similarly, in the physical world, that even though there's a beginning of this universe, just like we have a beginning of our life, there's not that doesn't mean a beginning of material matter and energy. It's beginningless, in fact, and endless. So similarly, just like in classical physics, material world, matter is beginningless and endless. So in Buddhism, the consciousness is beginningless and endless. So same theory, similar theory. And then lastly, Al-Mullah says, according to Buddhism, consciousness is regarded as an event or continuum of events rather than as a thing moving through time. Energy also can be best understood as an event, and even matter, which appears to us so thingish, dissolves into a matrix of events when it is closely examined. So Buddhism is not arguing that the mental realm is just as real and tangible as the physical world appears to be. Rather, it asserts that the substantial appearance of the world of physical things is deceptive, and that both physical and mental phenomena are best understood as interdependent events. This implies no phenomenon exists with its own intrinsic independent identity, because each phenomenon depends on others. In Buddhism, this is a key concept. So that's something important, particularly to understand in terms of nature of reality, but that's a little bit beyond this evening's talk. So we'll just leave it what he says there. So what I'd like to do now then is have a look at how we can divide up the mind. There are many ways of dividing up the mind. One way that's commonly used is we can talk about what's called the 6 consciousnesses. And this way of dividing up the mind is in terms of the objects that we can experience. So we can experience 6 types of objects. We can experience visual objects, we can experience sounds, smell, taste, tactile. So we can experience the 5 sense objects, but also we can experience mental objects such as thoughts and emotions. So because we can experience 6 types of objects, we can talk about 6 types of consciousness. We can talk about what's called the 5 sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness. So the 5 sense consciousnesses are the 5 aspects of the mind that can experience sense objects. For example, visual consciousness is the aspect of the mind that can experience visual objects. The auditory consciousness is the aspect of the mind that can experience sounds. And mental consciousness is the aspect of the mind that can experience thoughts, emotions, memories, and so on. Of course, we're not talking about 6 separate minds here. There's only one mind. Within that one mind, there are these 6 aspects, because we can talk about 6 types of objects. The 5 sense consciousnesses are non-conceptual, meaning they experience their object directly. So the visual consciousness, for example, experiences colours and shapes directly. Whereas the mental consciousness is conceptual. It experiences things through concept. For example, when I look at this cup, the visual consciousness sees colour and shape. But then the mental consciousness interprets that and goes, ah, that's a cup. And so we understand that via the concept of cup. So that's mental consciousness. So these are non-conceptual. This is conceptual.
But like how rigid are those five? Because like I guess sound is like vibrations. It's like physical and like touch. Like how to distinguish between touch and hearing, for instance.
Sure.
It's also concepts that kind of our physical body kind of make up. So
exactly the point. So these are not objective. They are concept. These are ideas to understand the nature of experience. It's one way of dividing up. We can divide up many ways. It's just a useful way. We're not saying they're separate, discrete things. We're just saying that this is a presentation to help us to understand how we perceive different things. That's all. We could also make up another presentation. We could combine, like you said, combine two things and call it something else if it's useful. So this is just a useful presentation. It's not like objective that it's 6 exactly. Yeah? Okay. I mean, we could just say 2. We could say mental, we could say conceptual, non-conceptual. Might work, but it's quite useful to know, to make it into 5, because we sort of have these 5 different ways of, because, you know, when we experience a physical object, it could be visual, we could smell it, we could taste it. I mean, all of those can be in the one experience, can't it? We could hear some vibration from it. All of that can come from one object, can't it? But it's useful to distinguish those aspects of that experience. That's all. Yeah.
I was just wondering where the internal body sensations fit into that, like the feeling of your heartbeat or the feeling of tingling.
That's tactile.
That's considered tactile.
Tactile, yeah. Tactile. So that's one way of dividing up mind. There are many ways, but one other way I'd like to briefly present now, which is very useful in terms of understanding how to transform the mind, is we can talk about levels of mind. We can talk about what's called the coarse mind. In psychology, this would be equivalent to the psyche. But in Buddhism, we also talk about a more subtle level of mind. It's called the subtle mind, sometimes translated as what's called substrate consciousness. But then we can also talk about a very subtle level of mind, the deepest level of mind. Sometimes this is translated as primordial consciousness. So this presentation is useful in that we want to be transforming our mind. But the mind that's active now, this is our coarse mind, is not very well trained, and we want to be able to transform the mind. So what we're doing one of the things we're doing in meditation is we're trying to gain access to a deeper level of our mind. Because this subtle mind is more balanced, more focused, more powerful level of mind. This is the level of the mind from which all the conceptual activity, like thoughts and emotions, emerge from. They emerge from there, experienced here, and dissolve back into this level. But then we can talk about a deeper level of mind called the very subtle mind, sometimes called primordial consciousness, which is the ground state of consciousness. And this is what is really fundamental in Buddhism. And this is beyond time, and it's not individual. You know, our mind is individual, our coarse mind. And even if we gain access to subtle mind, it's still individual. But this level of mind is beyond individuality. Very difficult to talk about, but this is the deepest level of our mind that we're trying to gain access to. And it's really the source of everything within Buddhism. So that's a presentation that then is useful when we start to talk about meditation and so forth. Any question about that? Yeah.
I'm just thinking about, like, if you're listening to sounds, but you're not identifying them verbally in your head, like you're not naming the sound, car passing by or crash of something, whatever. Sure. But you're just experiencing the sound. Is that a primordial level of experience? No,
that's coarse.
Just, okay.
It's coarse. The sense consciousnesses only function here. And actually, in meditation, you can gain access to this level of mind. Once you gain access to this level of mind, actually all your sense faculties have gone dormant. So if you're sitting in meditation in this level of mind, you won't hear anything. You won't have any sense of body. All the sense faculties are completely shut down because they only operate at the coarse level. Okay. How does the mind function? A number of presentations here, but just one brief presentation. We can talk about, in terms of our experience, we can divide the mind up into two in terms of our experience. So when we experience something, the raw experience is primary mind. Just the simple raw experience of the object. But then the mental factors will determine what type of experience we have of that object. And so really this is like Buddhist psychology. And here in mental factors, usually we come up with a list of 51 mental factors. So this is a whole big topic itself. And what we find in these mental factors, which determine what type of experience we have, more than half, 26 in fact, are mental afflictions. A mental affliction is anything that agitates and disturbs the mind. So mental afflictions, of course, include craving, jealousy, frustration, anger. All of these things are mental afflictions. They agitate the mind. So it seems like in the way we experience things, we have a lot of these mental afflictions present. And of course, other mental factors in here, I'll just briefly mention a few that are important in Buddhism. One, of course, is mindfulness. So mindfulness is a mental factor. And if that's not operating, then we're not very focused on anything. So mindfulness is very important. Another mental factor here that is very important is the mental factor of feeling. And in Buddhism, feeling doesn't mean emotion. It's coming from the Sanskrit word Vedana, and feeling is simply experiencing something as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Neutral means neither pleasant nor unpleasant. So this mental factor of feeling gets a lot of attention in Buddhism, the spotlight on it a lot. Why? Because this gets us into a lot of trouble. Because when we have pleasant experiences, craving and attachment. When we have unpleasant experiences, aversion, hostility, anger, hatred, and so forth. So this mental factor can get us into a lot of trouble. So you see it talked about a lot in Buddhism, feeling. As with, of course, mindfulness, we need to develop mindfulness. And also here in these mental factors, these mental afflictions that agitate and disturb our mind, we have 26 here, which is the extensive presentation. But if we condense all those mental afflictions down, we come down to a short list of 3, called the 3 poisons. And they're called the 3 poisons because they contaminate our mind. The first one of those is ignorance. And ignorance in general just means we're confused about something. But here in the 3 poisons, this ignorance is a very specific ignorance. It's an ignorance with respect to the nature of reality. And the Sanskrit here is avidya. Vidya means to know. Is negation, so not knowing. But here ignorance is more than not knowing the nature of reality. It's an active misunderstanding of the nature of reality. So we have this mental factor of ignorance is there all the time. And we are actively misunderstanding the nature of reality in our experiences. And from a Buddhist perspective, this is the root cause of all of our suffering. The other 2 poisons is attachment and aversion. Again, when we have a pleasant experience, this very often arises. When we have an unpleasant experience, this very often arises. So these are really the main driving elements in our behavior. And we're going to shortly see how that process works. How, from our distorted view of reality, do we end up in our current experiences, in particular, why we suffer. So that's coming very shortly now.
I have a question.
Sure.
Ignorance, is it by choice?
Here, there is often 2 types mentioned. One is called innate, and the other one is called intellectually acquired. So, from a Buddhist perspective, we've had this since we were born and well before. But on top of that, in this life, we may add to that by wrong way of intellectual thinking. But that is relatively easy to overcome, to overcome that level of ignorance because it's quite superficial. It's quite easy to correct that wrong way of thinking. But here we're really talking about what's called the innate one, and that's not really due to our wrong intellectual thinking. It's like instinctive. And this is, 1, it's very hard to recognize, and 2, it's hard to get rid of. The intellectual stuff is easier to recognize and easier to get rid of. Okay. So any questions about that primary mind mental factors? I mean, that's a huge topic, but basically in every experience, we have the raw experience plus, depending on which mental factors are present, will determine what type of experience we have. For example, if mindfulness is not very functioning, we're not even really attentive to what's in front of us. If we have, we may have craving and attachment present in an experience. We have some mental factors are always there. The mental factor of feeling, it's always there. Every experience, feeling is there. We experience that as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Some mental factors, sometimes there, sometimes not, like attachment, aversion, jealousy, sometimes there, sometimes not. Also, we have positive mental factors as well, not just the mental afflictions. Question?
Yeah, so ignorance is, you said it was ignorance about the nature of reality?
Correct.
And the nature of it, is it the same as the ignorance that I might or we experience us as a solid? Is that the same?
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. Yeah. There are levels of this ignorance. And I want to present now the subtlest level, and I think it's what you're trying to indicate with what you're saying. So I want to see how that leads to mental afflictions, and that's driving our behavior and why we're stuck in the situation we're in now. So let's have a look at that. So this is how our mind is really the creator of our experiences. And here, as I said, this ignorance, this distorted view of reality can come at a number of levels. But at the deepest level, it is the belief, the grasping to an independent me, independent objective world. The belief that independent subject, independent object. And this is not something we've intellectually acquired, it's something that's with us since we were born and well before. And so that's what seed of ignorance means. Seed means habit. The habit of grasping onto independent me, independent world. Again, it's not something we do intellectually, it's instinctive. So that's there always. When we look out on the world appears to exist independent of us. In fact, everything we've ever seen and experienced appears to exist independent of us. But here in Buddhism, in this view of reality, the assertion is that things do not exist as they appear. Even though there appears to be an independent objective world there, it doesn't exist like that. So what we are receiving now is what's called dualistic appearance. There seems to be subject-object duality. But the view of Buddhism is saying this is deceptive. So this appearance is called mistaken dualistic appearance. Now, everything has always appeared to us in this way. We've never seen anything in any other way. So there's no reason to question appearances. And if we ask anyone else, everyone else will say, yep, it appears to exist independent of me. So there's absolutely no reason to question it. So we don't. So we just accept. So that's step two. So step two is we just automatically accepting, yep, independent me, independent world. And as I briefly mentioned just before, in every one of our experiences, there's this mental factor of feeling present. So let's say, for instance, we're looking at these flowers. They appear to exist independent of us. We have the habit of believing that. We just accept. Yes, there's flowers existing there, independent of me. But let's say when we look at these flowers, we're having a pleasant experience. That pleasant experience, together with the belief that those flowers exist there independent of me, will naturally lead us to assume there must be some attractive quality there that's causing my pleasant experience. So we'll believe that these are inherently attractive. They're attractive from their own side. There is some beauty there. Buddhist assertion, of course, this is a misconception. Of course, if we look at these flowers and we're having an unpleasant experience, together with the belief that those flowers exist independent of us, will naturally lead us to assume there must be some unattractive quality there that's causing my unpleasant experience. We'll see them as inherently unattractive, unattractive from their own side. Or if we're having a neutral experience, inherently neutral. Once we get to this step, the fourth step easily follows. Let's say, again, I'm looking at these flowers and I'm having a pleasant experience. I like pleasant experiences. I want pleasant experiences. Those flowers seem to be causing my pleasant experience. I want those flowers. Attachment. Or if I'm having an unpleasant experience when I'm looking at these flowers, I don't like unpleasant experiences. I don't want unpleasant experiences. Those seem to be causing my unpleasant experience. Get them out of here. Aversion. Or if I'm having a neutral experience, that will simply reinforce my mistaken belief they exist independent of me, which is ignorance. But often here, instead of the word ignorance, we see the word confusion. But this confusion is not, we're confused about whether or not they're flowers. We're just confused about how they exist. So confusion is just another word for ignorance. So here in step 4, we see the 3 poisons, the 3 main mental afflictions. All other mental afflictions, like jealousy, craving, anxiety, and fear, and so forth, come out of one of those or a combination of them. This is what is driving our behavior. And the Buddhist assertion is that every action we do based on a mental affliction has a result, has a consequence. And the result of our actions is our experiences. And the Buddha described our experiences using the word dukkha. Which is often translated as suffering, but this can be misleading. Because here we're not saying that all of our actions lead to some sort of unpleasant, painful experiences. So remember, this is the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha. But this is basically the word that Buddha used to describe our experiences. So this is how a distorted view of reality leads to our mental afflictions. That's driving our behavior, and our behavior is resulting in our various experiences. So this is how our mind is the creator of our experiences. Which means that if we want to overcome this, we have to go back to the source. So if we want to overcome our mental afflictions and suffering, we need to get rid of this distorted view of reality. And in the second half of this evening's presentation, I want to look at how to do that. How do we transform our mind? How can we overcome mental afflictions and suffering and find that state of genuine happiness? But that's very briefly sort of the process of how our mind is the creator of our experiences. Any questions about this? And then I think it's just about time for a break.
So, like the example of the flowers, what's the seed of like ignorance?
Right, yeah. So the seed here means habit. And this ignorance here, again, there can be many types of ignorance, but the one we're talking about here is grasping onto independent me, independent world. That everything exists independently. And seed means the habit of doing that. So we have the habit of grasping onto independent me and world. Which means when we look there, these flowers appear to exist independent of us. We have the habit of believing that. We just accept that. We don't question appearances. We just accept, yep, those flowers are there independent of me. This is not an intellectual process. It's instinctive. We instinctively do that. So we're instinctively seeing those flowers as existing there independent of us. But here's the question. If I'm looking at those flowers and having a pleasant experience, where is the beauty? Because if those flowers exist independent of me, the beauty must be there because they're independent. But if the beauty was there, it would mean everyone who looked there would have to have a pleasant experience because the beauty's there. But I'm sure even in this room, there are probably a number of people who look there and don't particularly have a very pleasant experience. So are they somehow have some distorted perception where we're correct? Or is it the fact that there's no beauty there at all? So here, the Buddhist assertion is beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But that doesn't mean we're fabricating the beauty. It doesn't mean we're hallucinating. There is beauty. Where does the beauty come from? It comes from our interaction with that flower coming together. Beauty arises. There's no beauty there, and we're not hallucinating it here. But there is beauty. And this is the difficult point with this view, is for us, we are stuck in a dualistic world, and for us there's only two options. Either the beauty's there, or it can't exist. So when we negate the fact that the beauty's there, then often people fall to the extreme of nihilism, thinking, well, then there's no beauty at all. We're just hallucinating it. They are the two extremes that we oscillate between because we are stuck in this dualistic worldview. They're the only two options we've got available. Either it's there or it doesn't exist. Buddhism says both are mistaken.
I guess what Buddhism would say is the illusion of separateness when you know that human beings are separate. Like they're having separate experiences, they're having separate everything.
Okay, here we have to be careful with the words. Separate, we're not talking about, of course, physical distance. We're talking ontologically. So physical separateness is irrelevant in this discussion. Right. So big can only exist relative to small. But there's big and small, no? Isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah? So they're unique, but they're not, well, it depends what you mean by the word separate here. For us, normally separate means this is big, this is small. In that sense, nothing's separate, is it? Mm. But we can say separate as in they're not the same. You know, big is not small, but they're not big and small. So just like that, you can't have up without down, in without out. You can't have me without not me. You can't have me without you. Me, world, subject, object. So are subject and object distinct? Yes. Are they separate? Depends what you mean by the word. If you mean independent, no, absolutely not. But is there me and you? Of course. Are we individual? Of course. Are we independent? No way. Because if we were independent, it would be like, this is big, this is small. It just makes no sense, does it? Like you said, it's relative. So yes, there's big and small. They're unique. Big is not small, small is not big. But they're not separate in terms of independent.
Right. Okay.
Yeah?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe this question is about, I don't know, side, but it's like, I wonder what's before the one here. It's kind of, it's like the mind and a I guess mind also means heart in some way, or like the mind is not only the brain, the mind is a
Well, it's neither the brain nor the heart.
no, but like both or not.
Well, yeah. So hang on. Just let me answer that first, and you can ask the question. So mind in, often we talk about, colloquially, we say mind is thinking, heart is feeling. Mind in Buddhism is all that. Mind includes thinking, feeling, everything, all of our experiences. But it's not physical. It's not the brain. It's not the heart.
Yeah, so the clarity or the
Clarity, yeah.
emptiness or like that, but I wanted, I want to throw in a question about like compassion.
Yeah.
Because like if compassion is like compassion without like unconditional love, maybe.
Sure.
Like it's I wonder if that I can see that as the zero. Like we have this kind of potential that is compassion.
Correct.
And maybe that is also has something to do with beauty too. Like
Absolutely.
we project stuff because there is like actual potential of compassion. And then
Exactly.
And then it's great.
Yeah. After the break, we'll talk about nature of the mind, and we'll touch on this point. That, we talked about mental afflictions like attachment, anger, jealousy, and so forth. Some modern theories say that's hardwired, like particularly the ones that say the mind is the brain. They say, well, the brain is sort of hardwired, you're stuck with it. You better get used to it. You can maybe reduce your attachment, anger, jealousy a little bit, but that's it. There's no way you can get rid of them. No way, because they're hardwired. The Buddhist assertion that's not true is that these mental afflictions are not part of the nature of the mind, because the mind is clarity. They're just covering the surface of the mind. And therefore we can eliminate that. So, and when you eliminate that, then the purity of the mind, what is its nature? How does it express itself?
So this is a membrane over the...
Yeah. But so that's the thing, is that now these are mental afflictions like a filter. That's how we see the world. We're filtered by that. And no wonder it's hard to develop love and compassion when we're looking at the world through these eyes, is it? So when we strip that away, that inner purity of mind, what is its natural expression? Is love and compassion. Because when we strip away this ignorance, there is no separateness. There is no barrier. There's no like me here and them there. So as long as our mind is covered by ignorance, it's hard to develop love and compassion. Well, that's their problem. It's not my problem. I don't care what happens to them. But that's an illusion. There is no independent, separate you. So if you strip that away, the natural expression is love and compassion. Suffering arises, the natural response is compassion. Whether the suffering is arising in this body or that body is irrelevant. It's just arising. The natural expression is love and compassion. That is the natural expression of the mind. And this is a sign that how well we're starting to strip this away, this veil. That if we're stripping this away well, one of the things you should notice is that you're more spontaneously kind and compassionate to everybody. That is a sign that this process of transformation is working well.
I just quickly ask, so if I go at the origin of the mistake, the dualistic appearance, is it
Sure.
like a collective construct that we believe in this dualistic appearance? Or?
No, so remember, this is not a belief.
Okay.
This is often this is the analogy given here is that this is like our mind is stained. It's like we're looking out through the world through this stain. And that stain causes things to appear independent of us.
Even by birth?
Yeah.
So you can
This is all before. Yeah. This is not.
That's what I was.
This has been with us since forever. Yeah. So this is not a belief. This is just due to our mind being stained by this ignorance. When we look out on the world, everything appears to exist independent of us. So when we strip away this, we won't have this anymore. But what that looks like for us is unimaginable. We've never had that experience. To see the world in the correct way, we've never had that experience. But the assertion in Buddhism. When we strip that away, that's what we'll experience. And we won't have any mental afflictions or suffering, and just spontaneous love and compassion for everyone. Sounds pretty good. I'd like to start this second half with a meditation, but before that, there's a question came in here from someone online, and the question is, can you explain what the difference is between the aggregate feeling and the mental factor feeling, or is it the same? I mentioned this mental factor of feeling gets a lot of attention in Buddhism because it gets us into a lot of trouble. And actually, we often have a presentation of the person, you know, what's the person made up of? And simply we can say the person has a body and a mind, very simply. But then often the mind is divided up into this primary mind mental factors. And then within the mental factors, there are two mental factors that are very important: feeling, and another one called discrimination or discernment, our ability to clearly distinguish things. So of course, if that's not operating well, if we can't clearly distinguish things, we often get ourselves into trouble. So because those two mental factors are the source of a lot of suffering for ourselves, they often are taken out of this list and made separate. And so that's why we then have a presentation of a person called the 5 aggregates. The form aggregate is the body. The second and third aggregate is feeling, discrimination, these two mental factors taken out. The fourth aggregate is the rest of the mental factors, and the fifth aggregate is the primary mind. So that 5 aggregate presentation, the 5 parts of the person, highlights the fact that this feeling in particular is very important. Allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
And allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. Simply becoming aware of the rhythm of the breath. Now shift your attention to your own mind and simply observe whatever is appearing in the mind. without following thoughts, without trying to get rid of thoughts. Simply be like an impartial observer or witness, observing thoughts, emotions, memories, mental images, and so on, observing them as they arise and pass. Simply noticing what's going on in the mind without getting caught up in it. If you're becoming frustrated at not being able to observe your thoughts, then observe that frustration. Whatever is arising in the mind, observe it. And we can bring the meditation to a close. How was the movie? Was it just like static, or did you do channel surfing?
Yeah.
A lot of switching from different channels? I think that's our normal procedure. This practice we just did is good for a number of reasons. One is that, of course, it really helps us to become the masters of our own mind instead of being the slaves of our mind. But also this practice of just observing the mind is really what's called shamatha practice. It's a practice to develop a calm, clear, focused mind. And this is actually, for this 4-day retreat I'm doing over the weekend, this practice we just did is really the practice we're going to be doing on Saturday of the retreat, this practice. Okay. Nature of the mind. What is the nature of our mind? notice, if we observe carefully enough, is that the mind is clear and knowing. This conventional nature that the mind is clear, has clarity, and is aware becomes more and more evident to us in doing the practice we just did now. But also we can talk about the ultimate nature of the mind. And the ultimate nature of the mind is emptiness. And emptiness here simply means the mind is empty of independent existence. It's not independently existent. So as we were just previously explaining before the break, even though there seems to be an independent subjective me here and an independent objective world there, if we investigate, we'll come to see there is no independent me, independent world, that everything is actually interdependent. And the same goes with our mind. It seems like there is a mind here existing from its own side, independent of everything else, but if we investigate this mind, we'll come to see that there's no independent mind to be found. And so that's the ultimate nature of the mind, the fact that the mind is empty of independent existence because it's a dependent phenomena like everything else. And so we saw here in the previous presentation before the break that how the mind is the creator of our experiences, in that it's really our distorted view of reality that is leading to our current experiences, in particular why we are suffering. And so therefore, if we want to overcome that, particularly overcome suffering, we need to eliminate this distorted view of reality. So we need to come to realize emptiness, which is what's called the vipassana or wisdom practice. And we can do that by investigating anything, me, the laptop, the cup, to come to realize emptiness. But in a number of Buddhist traditions, the focal point is the mind, because that's where the origin of everything. So let's look at the mind, where, this mind that seems to be here, that seems to be very concrete and real and independent. Can we find this mind? And so then we investigate the mind to look for the mind, to see if we can find this independent mind that seems to be here. And if we don't find it, that not finding is an experience of emptiness. And through that experience, and we'll look at the stages we go through in that practice shortly, actually, we can overcome this distorted view of reality, thereby overcome our mental afflictions and overcome our suffering, and find liberation from suffering. Before I go on to that, is there any questions about this? Anything here not clear? Okay, so let's now look at then potential of our mind. Now, there are, as I mentioned, I think already, some modern philosophies or theories state that mental afflictions like anger, jealousy, craving, so forth, is hardwired. That's it, you're stuck with it. The best you can do is maybe reduce it, but tough luck, that's it. Part of being human, sorry, But Buddhism would disagree with that. No matter how strong a habit we have of getting angry, of being jealous, of craving, anxiety, we can overcome them, because the Buddhist assertion is that actually these mental afflictions are not part of the nature of our mind. Our mind is pure by nature. And that these mental afflictions are just like dirt covering the surface of our mind. And that we can eliminate this dirt through eliminating that fundamental ignorance, because we saw that it's our distorted view of reality that leads to all the mental afflictions and therefore leads to suffering. And so therefore in Buddhism, we often hear about this thing called Buddha nature. Buddha nature. And that's talking about this purity of mind. And Buddha nature can be understood in at least two ways. And I like to use the analogy of a window to highlight that. Let's say we've got a window and there's some dirt on the window. We can say, there's a dirty window. I need to put effort to produce a clean window, to make the window clean. And that's often the perspective we have, valid. No? Dirty window, put effort, make a clean window. Equally well, we could say, actually, there's already a clean window there. All I need to do is remove the dirt to see the clean window that was always there. That's also valid, no? True. It's not one's right or wrong, it's two different perspectives. And so similarly here with Buddha nature, purity of mind, we can have both perspectives. And some traditions use one and the others use another perspective. So in the Geluk school of Tibetan Buddhism, often they have the first perspective, that we have mental afflictions in the mind. We need to put a lot of effort to eliminate the mental afflictions to achieve the goal of enlightenment. Whereas in the Kagyu and Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism, they often adopt the other perspective, that there's already a Buddha within. All we need to do is remove the dirt, remove the mental afflictions to discover the Buddha that was already there. That's also valid. Now, both of those perspectives have advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage with the first perspective is that, oh man, there's so much dirt. I mean, there's so much mental afflictions. I have to do all this practice and all this work, and this enlightenment is so far away. It's just impossible. I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's too difficult. Whereas the second perspective, the disadvantage is, I'm already enlightened. I don't need to do anything. In fact, everything I do is with enlightened mind, so I can do whatever I want. So both have advantages and disadvantages, and we can use a perspective that works best for us. And how do we actualize it then? How do we eliminate that dirt? How do we eliminate the mental afflictions? So we can talk about three core areas of training. The foundation is ethics, in Sanskrit shila. Ethics is really just avoiding harmful behavior. So this is really about not adding more dirt. Because every time we get caught up in unethical behavior, we're increasing mental afflictions and suffering. So this is really not about adding more dirt. And then on that basis, we engage in what's called concentration practice, in Sanskrit samadhi. So this is about cultivating single-pointed concentration. Often in Buddhism, this is called shamatha practice. Shamatha is a particular level of concentration we're trying to develop. So often this concentration is just called shamatha practice. Shama or shamatha can divide into two. Shama means calm, a mind that is calm, it's not discursive, and ta means to remain or abide. So shamatha is often translated as calm abiding, a mind that is calm and abiding or focusing single-pointedly on an object. So it's really single-pointed attention, single-pointed concentration. With single-pointed concentration, what you will find is that the dirt of the mental afflictions, which agitates the mind, will subside. So this is a little bit like the analogy of if we have a container, glass container with water with sediment, and we're shaking it. And we can't see the clarity of the water. But if we put the water down and let it sit, the sediment goes to the bottom. And then we can see the clarity of the water. Concentration is like that. We do this practice. The sediment of the mental afflictions which are disturbing our mind will settle, and we'll see the clarity of our mind. But we haven't got rid of the dirt, because once we shake the water again, it gets cloudy. So once some stimulus comes, we get agitated, mental afflictions back. So we need to get rid of the dirt. This only sort of makes it sort of subside a little bit temporarily. So if we just do this concentration practice, you'll find that the extent to which your mind is calm and focused, to that extent you'll have less mental afflictions, less agitation, less craving, less aversion, and so forth. In fact, there's a quote from great Indian Buddhist master Shantideva. He says, "Those with a distracted mind are trapped in the jaws of the mental afflictions." So if our mind is distracted, we're more predisposed to mental afflictions like craving, jealousy, frustration, anger, and so forth. So this helps to settle the dirt, but then we need to eliminate the dirt. And that's the wisdom practice, in Sanskrit, prajna. This wisdom practice often in Buddhism is called vipassana practice. Although many of you are probably more familiar with the Pali word vipassana. So vipassana, VI means higher, superior. Passana means to see. So vipassana is higher seeing, seeing beyond, often translated as insight. We're talking about insight into reality. So here we're talking about realizing nature of reality. We're talking about realizing emptiness is the vipassana practice. Because if we can do that, we eliminate ignorance, mental afflictions, and suffering. Any questions about that? Clear? Yeah.
The concentration you mentioned, is that a certain point, kind of meditation, or is it meditation in general?
Right, good question. Of course, there are many types of meditations, and there are many ways of categorizing meditations, many. One way that sometimes that reflects this, that's categorization, is we put meditations into two classes. Stabilizing meditation is this, to just stabilize the mind. And then the second type is what's called analytical meditation, where we investigate, we analyze, and the vipassana is there, but also compassion in that class as well. Yeah. So the goal here is just to develop attention skills, calm, clear mind. And then we use that to investigate nature of reality. Now, to do these practices, we go through 3 stages.
What about open shamatha? When you practice on not focusing, actually allowing everything to exist.
That's not shamatha.
That's not shamatha.
No. So, so good question.
Yeah.
Is here we're developing single-pointed concentration. If our focus is too broad, it's not as effective. Of course, if we, in practice in daily life, if we have what's called open awareness, we're just attentive whatever's arising, very good. Good. But if we really want to develop a high level of attention skill, it's much more effective if we narrowed, I'm talking here meditation now, not daily life. In meditation, when we do this practice, it's much more effective to narrow down the focus, to have a narrow field of focus than if we just observe whatever's arising.
I've been to retreats with teachers like Sakyamuni,
Sure.
where I have received teachings.
Sure.
where you actually need to observe whatever that arises and not judging, not labeling.
Correct. And that's a valid practice, but I'm not sure the context there, because that could be a Vipassana practice, it could be many sorts of practice. As a shamatha practice, the purpose is to be non-judgmental. Maybe that was the purpose of that practice. The purpose here is to develop single-pointed concentration. So to develop single-pointed concentration, it's more effective if we narrow down the focus. It works better. So yes, doing this, fantastic, very good. But to do that, to develop this high level of concentration called shamatha, a little bit difficult because the focus is too broad. The mind is sort of moving around too much because it's attending to many different things. And so for shamatha, it's helpful to narrow that down. So generally in shamatha then we observe like the breath or the mind or some mental image is very common. In Tibetan Buddhism, often they use a mental image of a Buddha as an object, for example. So narrow down. But yes, this practice, of course, completely valid to have what's called open awareness, be non-judgmental.
When you decide to meditate, is it important then to know the purpose of the meditation?
Yeah, I mean, of course, when we do meditation, we should know what the purpose is. Otherwise, what are we doing?
Well, I can do it.
Yeah.
No, just because you said the purpose of that was maybe to be non-judgmental. So
Sorry?
Because you were talking about now?
Yeah.
So it's good to, in your own work, knowing.
Yeah. I mean, of course, when we're doing a practice, we need to know what the practice is and how to do it and what the goal is. Otherwise, we sort of, we go all over the place, And then if we start a particular practice, it's good to continue that and not start and go, oh, actually, I think I'd rather do this now, or, oh, no, I'll do this.
Change the channels.
Yeah, we keep channel surfing. Then we're not going to get very far. Okay. Now, we go through, in all practices, 3 stages. I like the Tibetan words here, go, nyam, tok, because they're very short. Go means intellectual. So first, we need to have an understanding of what the practice is. Otherwise, what are we doing? We don't know what to do. So here, we have an intellectual understanding. So in terms of, for example, Vipassana practice for nature of reality, here would be an intellectual understanding of emptiness, the fact that things are interdependent, and how to do the practice. But even if we have a correct intellectual understanding that everything's interdependent, that itself is not going to change anything, because our behavior is not driven by our intellectual understanding. It's driven by instinctive habits. And I think probably most of us here have at some level, at some degree, an intellectual understanding of interdependency, in climate change and everything. So we appreciate interdependency at some level intellectually. But is that helping us in our life? Not a lot. If we're constantly thinking about it, maybe it helps a little bit. But so intellectual is not enough. So what we need to do is we need to bring that into experience, make it experiential. So we need to meditate. We need to investigate nature of reality to come to an experience of nature of reality. That's nyam. Nyam means taste or experience. So let's say we sit down, we meditate, we do our emptiness practice, looking for the person or looking for the mind, and we come to this emptiness experience. And if our mind is quite focused, that experience could have quite a strong impact on our mind. Meaning, after the meditation, we could be still affected by that emptiness experience. And during that time, and it may last a few minutes, few hours, maybe a few days, during that time, you'll notice a few things. You'll notice your mind is more calm than normal, less mental afflictions, and also you'll feel much more close to people, more kind, more compassionate. But then that'll wear off and we're back to our normal ways, anger, jealousy, get out of my way, and so forth. So what we want to do is we want that to be stable, longer lasting. So that's the next stage called tok. which is realization. So realization is now a stable experience of whatever we're meditating. In this case here, we're talking about emptiness. To move from here to here, for this, we need shamatha. We need this level of concentration called shamatha. Because anything less than that, our mind is not stable and clear enough to fully penetrate the nature of reality. At best, we will have a taste or experience of emptiness that could be very profound and last for some time, but it'll wear off. So to have it long lasting, we need to achieve shamatha. This is why shamatha is the basis of vipassana. So in fact, we need to actually unify them to come to a direct experience of emptiness. And when we're talking about emptiness practice, like all practices, two parts. That if we want any practice to be effective and progress, we need to meditate, to internalize, but then we need to integrate into daily life. Because if we only meditate, then what little benefit we get from the meditation will be quickly evaporated by our mindlessly running around with mental afflictions all day long. And if we only try to integrate into daily life, we really don't have any sort of basis to even begin to do that. But if we meditate, internalize whatever we're meditating on, and then bring that into daily life, then they'll support each other. So therefore, in terms of the shamatha practice, the meditation would be we're developing single-pointed concentration on whatever object we use, maybe the breath, the mind, an image, whatever object. And then in daily life, we would continue to cultivate mindfulness throughout the day, to try to be mindful, like you said, the open presence, the open awareness, to be mindful of whatever is arising in daily life, non-judgmentally. So this is how we would bring the mindfulness into daily life. And then in terms of vipassana practice of emptiness and the meditation, we would do what's called space-like emptiness practice, where we investigate, and we can investigate the person, the mind, anything. And if we're looking and we don't find, that emptiness experience is a space-like experience. And we just rest in that experience of emptiness as long as we can. And then in daily life, how to bring that into daily life, we practice what's called illusory-like emptiness, meaning we question appearances, particularly when we experience something pleasant and unpleasant in daily life. You know, we see these attractive flowers. Then based on our understanding and experience of emptiness and meditation, we'll go, those flowers really seem to be attractive there, but I know from my understanding and experience, there's no beauty to be found there, that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So if we can question appearances in daily life, that breaks down the grasping mind, which will then feed back into the emptiness meditation, so they'll help each other. So this is how to practice in general. So any questions about that? Because, in fact, that's about all I wanted to mention this evening, and we've still got 5 minutes left for some questions. Or actually 7 minutes, to be precise. So anyone have any questions?
I'm wondering if the materialistic view of mind, does it follow naturally from that there is separation between subject and object?
Right. I think in scientific materialism, I think that, of course, the basis is that everything's matter. And I think that the idea of things existing independently, objectively, is part of that. Theory, I think. Yeah, because for them, in that theory, mind either is simply the brain, function of the brain, or emergent property of the brain. So then there's not really, and then the mind. So the mind can be explained in terms of the brain. So there is no sort of mind-object duality, so to speak, I think. So then there is just the material world, basically, which exists subjectively. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused about 3 stages.
3 stages, yeah.
Could you please give us an example?
Right. Yeah, so I was using the example of the emptiness. So we said here that, you know, the world appears to exist independent of us, and we accept that. So the first stage here is to gain a correct intellectual understanding, to use reasoning and logic to investigate, to see that actually nothing exists independently. So then we get a correct intellectual understanding here that everything's actually interdependent. But that intellectual understanding is not really going to change anything in our life. I mean, if we thought about it all the time, it may be a little bit helpful, but our behavior is driven by instinctive habit. So we need to change our habit. So we need to internalize that. So what we do then is we meditate. So we sit down and we meditate and we investigate. And maybe we can investigate me, the person, the mind, the body, whatever we want, and see, is there an independent me here? Is there an independent mind here? And if we search and we don't find the independent me or the independent mind, that not finding is an experience of emptiness. That is a taste or experience of emptiness. And if we get to that point in the meditation, we just rest in that experience, allowing it to penetrate deeper into the mind. But it'll wear off. So we need to take it to the next level. And that is realization. And that is where we have then a direct realization of emptiness instead of just a little taste in meditation. And we can only get that if the mind is very stable and clear, if we have single-pointed concentration. So that's why shamatha is the basis of vipassana. We need to develop single-pointed concentration as a basis for gaining the direct realization of emptiness. Because if we don't have that single-pointed concentration and we investigate, our mind is not stable and clear enough to fully penetrate. It's like if we're trying to solve a difficult problem at work, very difficult problem, but we keep getting distracted or we're half asleep. It'll be difficult to solve it, isn't it? So similarly here, if our mind is distracted or dull, it's going to be hard to fully penetrate. In fact, impossible. But if our mind is very sharp and clear, we can fully penetrate, and then we can come to a direct realization of emptiness. And if we have this experience in meditation, in the middle of if we're having the experience in meditation, at that point, in that time, there's no longer a sense of me. It's completely gone. There's just the experience of emptiness. Whereas when we're having a taste of emptiness or experience in meditation, in that experience, there's a sense of me experiencing this emptiness. Whereas here, that sense of me is completely gone. Because this is a completely non-dualistic experience. There's no subject-object duality at all. There's simply the experience of emptiness. We need this to start to eliminate ignorance and mental afflictions. This is only strong enough to temporarily subdue, keep the mental afflictions from arising a lot. Whereas this is starting to cut ignorance and mental afflictions. Okay. Time for one more question, if anyone has one. Okay, then right down the back, yes.
I hate to put you down a bit. What's the possibility of actually achieving concentration?
What's the possibility? Well, that depends completely on level of your commitment and your lifestyle and all sorts of factors and where you are at the moment. I mean, there are many variables in that. But also, I think we need to understand that whatever steps we take in that direction, our life will improve. It's not like if I don't make it, I get no benefit. And if we go into that practice and we start to receive benefit, I think you'll find that things in your life will shift and change. And then maybe now the conditions didn't seem like suitable to do a lot of this practice. Suddenly you have these conditions. So I think we need to be careful not to sort of grasp onto this idea that, oh, there's that goal, but it's so far away. I'm hopeless. I can't do it. I don't have any good conditions. I won't try. I think that would be a big mistake. Because I think any effort we put into this, any of these sort of practices, we're going to receive a lot of benefit. Our lives will improve a lot, in fact. Okay. So that was sort of an introduction to the Minded's potential for the Discovering Buddhism program. And then this weekend in the retreat I'm leading, the Stillness and Motion, will be mainly focusing actually on this shamatha practice. That's what the practice is for this weekend's retreat. And in particular, we're going to be using the mind as the object, so a little bit like we did in the meditation, but also then this practice of what's called resting in awareness. And also we're going to be introducing a little bit of loving kindness and compassion practice in the weekend retreat as well. So that's the 4-day retreat, if anyone's interested. So that's it. So I hope you got something out of this evening's session. So thanks for coming.
Thank you.